Hi everyone, welcome to Fifth Disciplines podcast where we talk about everything to do with people, brand and systems in the climate change space. Today I'm very excited to have Bernard Asnong with us. He is an international speaker, moderator, trainer and global HRBP for TÜV SÜD, and he is also the author of Be Awesome, Be Global. Thanks so much, Bernard, for joining us. A very warm welcome to the show. How are you today?
Very well, Lindy. All the better for having this opportunity to exchange with you today, and very much looking forward to it. I'm excited.
Fantastic. So you've obviously written this book, Be Awesome, Be Global. I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit more about it. And then maybe you can also just tell our listeners a bit about your personal and professional journey and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, right. Be happy to. So the inspiration for the book came out of the need to always answer the question, you get asked is, where are you from? So now I can say, actually, you can read my book because it's a long story, which is an alternative to say, hey, well, have you got time for a couple of beers? And then I can give you an answer because it's quite complicated. We'll discover through the conversation
Yeah.
today. Yeah, and
Awesome.
my professional trajectory, well, I studied hotel management in the UK, then went on to specialize in human resources. Also moved to Spain in 2005, and there I had to reinvent myself and got into consulting in the automotive industry. And that was an exciting and interesting journey. Then moved to Madrid, where I'm currently located, and now work for a multinational company in the testing, inspection, certification sector, and as a global people business partner for one of our divisions.
Fantastic. When you
Mm.
talk about being the global business partner for TÜV SÜD, tell our listeners a bit about the size of the company and what exactly the certifications are that you specialize in.
So we have over 30,000 employees globally, with 77 nationalities represented. It's a very diverse organization. We're very proud of that. It's got 160 years of history, and we specialize in making the world a safer place to live. Basically, in your daily life, you will walk into a lift, you'll take a train, you will cross a road, right? So there are many things that are regulated in many countries and that require a annual or periodical inspection in order to guarantee that that asset is still safe to use and is not going to ultimately injure anybody or kill anybody. So yeah, that's what we've been doing for the last 160 years, is trying to save lives and make the world a safer place to live. And also now with all the sustainability topics, also in terms of environment and emissions and stuff, also trying to help govern around that.
Fantastic. So I couldn't be speaking to a better person that understands different cultures, looking at that demographic of the team.
There it is. Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, awesome. So, Bernard, in your book, Be Awesome, Be Global, it follows you from Bridge in Zimbabwe to England to Spain and beyond. And
Mhm.
when you look back at your Barefoot to Global journey, what's an early story that you can share with our listeners that really shaped how you see people and culture at work?
Yeah. By the way, I love that line you've created, that Barefoot to Global. I love it. I'm going to use it with your permission, Lindy. Um,
Of course.
yeah. So to answer your question, I think there are two milestones in my life which really helped me get the values that I carry with me to this day, which was actually when I was studying in the UK, I would go back to Zambia when my father was managing a big pig farm. And
Mm.
instead of just lying back and doing nothing, I actually used to enjoy going and working on the farm and helping out, unloading trucks with feed bags. It was like going to the gym, great exercise, mucking out all the pig waste and really bantering and working with the local workforce and having a really good time with them. And it was a great laugh and a lot of banter. They would tease me. It was rewarding work and also made me appreciate just how tough work can be to make money to put food on your table. So that was one. It was a very humbling experience and gave me a good work ethic and appreciation for hard work. The other one was actually a scenario which was in London working in hotels. Hotels are very diverse, and we had this person working in the pot wash in the kitchen, and he was of Indian nationality, and nobody could understand him, except me for some reason. And I think it was through empathy and patience and body language we managed to communicate. His name was Dilly, and I remember him fondly. And we built up a rapport. And then every time they needed to give him instructions, they would call me to go and then, explain what needed to be done. anything.
Personal
And
translator.
and so once we had this staff party and one evening, and there was some music and everybody having a good time. And suddenly, Diddy came up to me and he said, "Bernard, do you think you could ask them to put Michael Jackson's Thriller on? Could you speak to the DJ?" I said, "Okay, Diddy, sure." I said, "I really like that song." So I said, "Okay." So I went to the DJ, asked him, "Please put on Thriller, Michael Jackson," and he duly did so. And suddenly, Dilly broke out and he knew the whole choreography and danced to the whole of the Thriller, and we all kind of stood back, wow, and that night everyone understood Dilly, that
Yeah.
communication was, and there was a beautiful moment. And why am I telling this anecdote? Because I think it's also a lot about having fun. We forget to have fun at work, and the rich tapestry of diversity makes that happen. And I think sometimes we just take this a bit too seriously, and sometimes it's just about having fun, and that's what people want to do ultimately at work.
Yeah. And it goes on that element as well as it breaks down those barriers around relationships when you see a person for who they really are, even though not all of us are pros at dancing to Thriller. That really, it humanizes that experience that you have in your day-to-day work.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there, I mean, any advice that you have or that you've seen from your personal experience that you can speak to about how do you bring out those elements of people? What could leaders do to, and also, I suppose, team members do to bring out that authenticity between their colleagues and really break down those personal barriers?
Be authentic, be sensitive to cultural differences, encourage people who might be quieter to participate, and you need to do that to actively get them to engage as a leader. Also, taking people out of the room who might be taking more of the fair share of the attention in the room because of their also maybe culture, and take them aside and quietly say, "Hey, allow the space for others to be able to contribute in the conversation." So I think this is what you have to do, is kind of be that moderator and allow everybody in your team and in that team dynamic, which hopefully is diverse, to be able to have the opportunity and the psychological safety space to
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I think, it's so hard not to get caught up in those conversations oneself, but to step back and truly see, what is the facial, non-verbal and verbal cues that the team is displaying and how do you create that cohesion around it?
yeah, it's being able to read the room. It's a skill, and
Mm,
that's something that you need to develop.
yeah.
To do.
Okay, so you call yourself a global citizen and you've obviously worked in hotels and consulting and now are the global people business partner for TÜV SÜD. How has living in 7 different countries changed the way that you define a good leader or a great leader rather?
Well, you can even settle for good leader. Living in 7 different countries stretches your definition of what good leadership is. So in a way, no book or course could do. Good leadership is about stopping yourself from trying to always being right, and actually about starting to being adaptable. So it's about humility. It's about removing the ego. It's about being authentic. I think people smell bull a mile away, regardless of their ethnic origin or culture. So yeah, just being fair. This works anywhere and everywhere. Yeah.
And I suppose also on that element, I mean, you speak about that authenticity, and I think to a large part it also builds that trust from the team, where you're candid in what you can say and what you can't say. But do you also have
Yeah.
any advice or any experiences around, where do you draw the line of being too candid or authentic and yeah, any
Yeah, I'm
suggestions for leaders?
I'm glad you asked that. I didn't want to be misleading in the sense that it's not a question of also trying to be everybody's friend, right? I think as a leader, you have an obligation to be kind, but that doesn't necessarily mean being nice. And there's a difference. I think, if you have to give tough feedback to somebody, that might be nice, but it's a kind thing to do, and it's a generous thing to do, and it's your obligation as a leader. I think the sooner leaders understand that they are the service of their people, the better they will be at leaders.
Yeah, yeah. That's really good advice. And I suppose that's also that element of, you know, as a manager or a leader in any form, you are responsible for your team's time and making sure that they progress within their careers and they develop personally and professionally. And then from your experience as global HR, what are some of the most important human behaviors leaders need to adapt to when they move between cultures? So things like how direct they are, the feedback that they give, and you spoke about showing that they care. Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on that, or do you have some further thoughts on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first bit of advice would be to read an excellent book, which the listeners might have heard of, and if they haven't, I would encourage them to go out and buy it and read it if they are leading diverse teams with a geographical spread. It's by Erin Meyer, and it's called The Culture Map. It's got a really bright yellow cover. You can't miss it. Wonderful book. Read it. It's full of advice, practical advice and tips. First thing. As a leader, as we mentioned before, right, when reading the room and saying, learn to adjust your tone, the way you interact with a Dutch colleague who might be very direct, it needs to be different than that of your behavior with a Chinese colleague who might be very hierarchical. So you need to be mindful of that and adapt your language and your tone to that difference. Also engage with an external partner like your company, Lindy, get external help. People are professionals who know what they're doing and get them to facilitate workshops, invest time and training into your leadership so that they are more culturally aware and sensitive and don't just read Erin Meyer's book, but actually engage and exchange and having an external facilitator to do that with the right competencies and know-how it would be in my opinion, a great investment. And ultimately, there isn't a one size fits all, right? Even outside of the cultural diversity topic that we're discussing today, even within your own team, you need to be aware, right? Through things like DISC, and again, external providers may support you with that, to be able to understand what are the nuances in your team and the team dynamics and the different personalities and how they need to be managed, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those are kind of my 4 pointers.
So you, Bernard, you also do speaking or speaking presentations to large
Mm-hmm.
audiences. Is there a
Mm-hmm.
common theme around behavior or questions that you tend to see? Is a common thread that they're asking and saying, how do we apply this personality assessment, or how do we apply Erin Meyer's cultural map to our workplace? What are some of the common challenges that you see businesses generally facing?
So yeah, it goes back to this complexity of navigating the cultural diversity, right? So what I'm encouraging and what we do in an organization is create organizations that are managed by employees for employees, where they've created a community and offer this opportunity for people to exchange and be more empathic to the cultural differences. So I think as an organization, anything you can do to encourage this dialogue and exchange and opportunities to learn that maybe you have got some subconscious biases which you're not even aware of, and through that safe space and just conversing about it, you might become conscious of your subconscious biases and therefore able to do something about it and really think twice the next time you're in that situation. And I think that all kind of feeds into creating a more tolerant environment, work
Yes,
environment.
And the one thing that you spoke about, which I think is quite interesting for quite a few listeners, is the coaching and getting external providers in, because a lot of I suppose leadership sessions, they tend to be once off, and then it's kind of like, well, how do I apply this, or how do I check myself before I wreck myself, kind of thing. Have
Mm.
you seen that that's quite a big uptake from companies, and how far down the line do they use the coaching? Yeah, any trends that you've sort of seen in that space?
It's a tough question and one that I don't really feel qualified to answer. However, I would agree with you that just doing a one-off training session is not enough. It requires a continuous and constant engagement from senior leadership in terms of setting an example, bringing people to attention when their behavior is not aligned to those values, listening to your employees through various employee experience activities that allow them to be able to articulate when they're feeling that they are being discriminated against and so on, and taking action really for your employees to feel and see that actually you believe what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you've also spoken a little bit about psychological safety and mental wellness, the themes around that. Do
Mm.
you have any suggestions on how do you assess at what stage maybe there is a psychological safety. I know you've spoken about feedback and things like that and mental wellness. I mean, what sort of initiatives make sense for organizations that maybe don't have a big budget or, can allocate? What triggers should they look for and what can they do to ensure mental wellness? Because I think over the years it's changed what the concept or the thoughts around what mental wellness is. I'm sure you remember, like me, working till all hours of the night kind of
Yeah,
thing, and that was acceptable.
yeah, and this feeds in also to the different generational needs, right? And how different generations approach work, how they value work. And what I encourage leaders to do here is, again, being sensitive to your team, right? You know them better than anybody else. You're working with them on a daily basis. And when you start to see the signs of somebody who suddenly used to be very participative, but now is withdrawn, it's either being passive aggressive, and so something is happening there, and not to ignore that because the problem is not going to go away. So engage an external coach or speak to your people business partner or ask for help and do something about it. Take action, dialogue, speak to the person, find out what's going on and take action. And that's for companies that might have limited resources. I think also in the bigger companies, we also have facilities in place where people have hotlines and apps where they can talk about their problems with an external company to support them and walk them through even personal issues, right? Which invariably impacts on performance at work. So we do a lot around that, around alcoholism and drug abuse and so many facets. We really want to support our employees in feeling that they have somewhere to go to and to turn to and be supported because ultimately also impacts on their performance at work. And we want people to have fun and be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I suppose that's it at the end of the day, when people are happy and they're feeling positive, not only their level of engagement, but they just perform that much better. They're not constantly in this cycle of being fearful and worried if they're going to make a mistake, anything like that.
Yeah.
And then your book invites us to also question how much weight we give to borders and national identities. In the organizational context, what happens when leaders genuinely see their teams as global citizens rather than HQ versus regions or us versus them?
The many large organizations have a matrix organization, right? So you have the vertical divisions who are driving the strategy and the qualitative aspects, and then you have the regional horizontal line, which is the sort of operational delivery and the interface with the customer. This is a complex juxtaposition in terms of it does add complexity, but at the same time, it's also very enriching in terms of diversity of ideas, in terms of how to better serve our customers ultimately, and ensure that we deliver an outstanding service to our customers. Also the market expectations, right? I mean that having that matrix organization allows you to structure yourself in such a way where you can better serve again those customers who, no longer looking for a service in just one country. So it still happens, of course, that you serve one client in Spain for a specific out of Spain, but there are more and more projects which span various countries and boundaries, and that's actually where our expertise and the fact that we have that global footprint allows us and enables us to be able to provide the service to our clients. So that diversity is also a wonderful thing because then it leads me to another navigating those stakeholders means that there's also a diversity of opinion. And so leaders, and especially senior leaders at some point, need to be also brave enough to go from consensus to courage and say, okay, we've listened to everybody. We've taken into account everybody's opinion. However, a decision needs to be made. And it's being courageous enough to take that decision, knowing that not all stakeholders might be aligned. Nevertheless, it's also much better when you have various opinions on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Do you find that, I mean, obviously there's been this major shift, especially after COVID, for everyone to move online. Have you sort of sensed that communication has changed a lot, that it's more text-based and people are too scared in a global organization to maybe pick up the phone, and that communication being text-based has ramifications on those relationships between international teams and understanding cultural nuances?
becoming increasingly challenging to keep people engaged into your corporate culture. Right? Because they're
Mm,
distant, they might be disconnected, they might not have daily contact with colleagues. So this is an increasing challenge, and that we're all learning to deal with.
yeah.
Keeping people engaged, regardless of whether it's through a screen on Teams or whether it's in person, is again the responsibility of leaderships, of creating that environment where people are allowed to really express their frustrations, how they're feeling, and yeah, that's encouraging that kind of environment. However,
Yeah.
as companies, you see it more and more are also insisting that employees do come to the office at least twice a week in many circumstances. Again, so that that exchange around the water cooler or the coffee maker
Mm,
happens because it's very so enriching. And especially younger generations need that. I think I feel sad sometimes, for some people that I see even in my personal environment who work pretty remotely. And maybe it's just my generation, they don't need it, but I suddenly think back on how enriching it was to be able to exchange and banter
mm,
and learn and dialogue with colleagues. And
yeah. And I think a
organizations
lot,
have realized that.
yeah, and I think that's also where a lot of the learning happens. It's not always a
Mm,
structured conversation or meeting where the learning does happen.
yeah.
And Bernard, have you got any advice to companies that have international teams, how to do team building across countries? Any suggestions there on how that can look without necessarily always flying in different teams everywhere?
We've been doing some great stuff. So we have a center of expertise which works solely on this. So it's a corporate function within our people organization that really spend a lot of time and put a lot of effort into designing programs that really help our leaders and our employees learn how to deal with this new world of work and
Yeah.
this globalization. And again, as I said previously, engaging an external partner to facilitate
Mm,
that and help you with, because they bring in their expertise, they have experience with that, is also, again, a great investment in terms of getting
mm,
that alignment, bringing people together. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be in a physical location, although we are fans and we will make that investment and bring people together because we also feel that that face to face interaction is important. However, this
mm,
hybrid setup works very well for us, and it's something that we do a lot of, and because we want people to feel engaged and that they sense of belonging and understand where we're heading into the future for the next 160 years and where we've come from, right? And what our legacy is of 160 years. So we're just celebrating our anniversary this year, actually, something we're very proud of. So TÜV SÜD existed before the car, right? Just to give you an idea.
not many companies that can say that.
No, 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 absolutely. Very proud.
No, that's really helpful advice, and I think that's also maybe a testament to how TÜV SÜD has focused on people and building in that culture and making sure that everyone understands the vision and the goal, and you're all moving in one direction.
Yes.
Okay, and then you've also written about and spoken about the humanistic side of leadership and talent development. How do you personally protect your own mental wellness when you hold a global role that everyone's, where you have to care about everyone else?
I get lonely. To be honest, it does have its challenges. I
Yeah.
think it does require a certain mindset. But to answer your question, going to the gym, having that discipline, it's tough. You're working a lot of hours, personal obligations, but I've gotten into that routine and discipline of going to the gym. I think that's super important, especially as you age. I'm not the young guy anymore, and for my brain and cognitive functioning, not just for the, physical well-being. Writing a book, it was also very therapeutic for me personally. Going for long walks with a friend or even your dog helps tremendously. Buying vinyl, having that patience, which people are losing, to just put the needle on the first track and listen to the whole record in this fast-paced environment, obliging yourself to just sit back and listen and have that helps you disconnect. Finding a trusted mentor is super important. Somebody that can be a sparring partner and that you can really have trustful engagement with and exchange with and hopefully has more experience than you and more different perspectives is very helpful. I found that to be tremendously helpful. And then self-gratitude, practicing self-gratitude. And what do I mean by that, Lindy? It's kind of getting into that daily routine, and I do it in the evening before I go to bed, or even when I'm lying in bed, and I think back on my day and just think about those three things that I'm especially grateful for. And it can be the silliest thing, like, that fast food meal you had with your family that evening and the exchange you had with them, and how nice that was, whatever, right? Just think of those three things and that you're grateful for.
Yeah. And I suppose that's
Yeah.
all part of like building that positive mindset, you're instilling that behavior of being grateful and appreciating, the experiences that you have. And I like that you
Mm,
spoke about, taking the time not to be scrolling on your phone, rather enjoy
mm.
life as it comes and don't get caught in the moments, I suppose.
You
Um,
see so many people like this. Bro.
and then also when you spoke about writing a book, are you going to write another book anytime soon? And what would it be about?
Well, they say you should never say and reveal your plans because then they might not happen, right? Because you
Well,
fool your
what's
brain
this?
into thinking you've done it. So I've not dismissed the idea. And I definitely feel I could improve a lot on the first one, right? So I didn't have an editor behind me. When people read my book, they will very quickly see that it's rough on the edges, it's authentic, it's unpolished, but it's me revealing myself in my truest, nakedest form to the world. And from the feedback I've received, people have really appreciated a level of authenticity whilst reading it. And I'm not sure I'd be able to replicate that. And if I do attempt it, then certainly there are a lot of things that in hindsight I could improve, taking more time. The book I wrote last time I did it in one summer, it was really kind of just a bringing it all out, putting it all down on paper and then publishing it. And this time I
Yeah,
think it would take a bit more time in terms of the editing and
yeah.
adding more anecdotes. And yeah, because people told me, hey, I would have liked to have heard more actually. And
Yeah.
so having taken
That's
that time to,
your
yeah,
follow-on book then. But I suppose that's also nice because it's that going through the process of writing a book, there's a lot of self-reflection that happens. I know my
yeah,
memory is not the best, so I'd have to fill in the blanks and go down memory lane. But it's quite a thing being able to publish a book and go down that personal journey, I suppose.
I would encourage it to anybody who's thinking about it. Just do it.
And then for leaders listening in Joburg, Nairobi, or Madrid, who want to be global without losing themselves, what's one daily habit that will, over time, grow their cultural intelligence?
There's a great Swahili, Sikiliza. Do
What
you
does
know
that
what it
mean?
means?
No, tell me.
It means listen. And I believe that we are losing the ability to listen actively.
Mm,
So the daily habit and as a constant habit by Sikiliza, really
mm,
listen. First of all, and work on your unconscious biases. Also, learn a language. I think that also offers a lot of opportunities to to understand cultures and the nuances and engage with people who you might otherwise not engage with in that process of learning the language, which
mm,
then might lead on to travel. And by travel, I mean we're so much of the tourism, and you see this with the boom in Japan as well. People are curious and hungry to understand and learn other cultures, but they're also very motivated by the bucket list and taking that selfie in front of the monument and saying, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, rather than
yeah,
really going off track, getting to really learn and experience that culture, taking public transport,
mm,
and yeah, becoming more open to different things and
yeah,
the flavors and diversity and colors.
yeah.
To tear down your prejudices.
Yeah, I think that's great because, like you said, when you go off track and you don't do the tourism thing, you're really actually understanding cultures
Mm,
and what it means to live in that country. Because I think now in a world where cultures are sort of falling apart and we're becoming one universal culture, it's so nice to be able to absorb that and be thankful for those different cultures and live in the moment while these
mm,
cultures are alive. You spoke about
mm,
something else that was really interesting about active listening, and I suppose that goes into the art of listening as well.
mm,
There was a really interesting video or movie that I watched the other day, and I can't remember what the title was, but it was about offloading the bucket or unloading the bucket. And the concept was around this lady, a reporter, journalist, and she would go in and speak to these very far wing people that, you know, they were quite racist and things like that. But anyway, she allowed them, she actively listened and allowed them to speak. And naturally, over time, they started to change their own perception of, you know, what they thought was okay, or, you know, their racism and things like that. And I think that active listening goes two ways, exactly like you say, where it's either your perception that you might realize needs to shift from a relationship with someone, or maybe the other person is given that room to offload their bucket and their perception might shift without you telling them to do it.
Yeah, completely agree. It's a give and take, and that's been my personal experience as well. I admit, also from how I was raised in the environment I grew up, and also, I'm talking about 4 decades ago. The world was certainly a very different place than it is today, or maybe not actually. And so being able to put aside what you've maybe been exposed to and listen to in those formative years, and as an adult being able to make up your own mind and listen and consider other points of views and
Yeah.
open yourself to other experiences, allow you to then adopt a different mindset and maybe a different opinion. That might sound very romantic. It worked for me. It might not work for everybody. As Lindy, unfortunately, this world is also diverse in terms of it doesn't matter where you go or which culture, you will find wonderful people as well as people who are really unpleasant. And that, it doesn't matter where you go to. It's like that.
Yeah. But I suppose it keeps the world interesting, hey, because it would be all very boring if we were the same.
It certainly does.
But Bernard, we're coming to a wrap, but I want to ask you, where can our listeners connect with you, and how do they get their hands on your book?
Okay, so thank you very much, Lindy, for giving me the opportunity to say that it is available on Amazon. You can buy it through the self-publishing on Amazon. Please read it. The book costs less than a Big Mac meal. And, I think you'll enjoy it, and I look forward to getting people's feedback and discussing it with them. Yeah, and if they want to get connected with me, as you said at the very beginning, Asnong, you pronounced it perfectly. Thank you very much. Easy to find. Just Google it and you'll find my LinkedIn profile and so on. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's been so great having you on this. Yeah, it's been so great having you on the show, and I hope we can have a follow-up session, especially when you publish that next book.
Thank you, Lindy. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Congratulations for also being extremely brave and being an entrepreneur, and for the great stuff you're doing, and for offering us the opportunity to also talk about these values that we all feel so strongly about. So thank you for creating that platform. And it has been a pleasure exchanging with you today, Lindy.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Bernard. So that's a wrap for our show. Remember, if you liked the show, to subscribe and stay updated with the latest news and updates from Fifth Disciplines podcast, People, Brand, and Systems.